Someone's going to ask you to approve an AI project, possibly this quarter. There'll be a demo and it'll go well. Demos do. So here are 5 questions to ask before you say yes. 5. In order, each one aimed at a specific way these things die after the applause. Last time we looked at why buying AI mostly works and building it mostly doesn't. The short version: when you hand people a chat license, nothing lands on you. The moment you wire something into how the business actually runs, 5 obligations land on your side of the table at once. These are those 5 obligations turned into questions. None of them is about the model. All of them can be answered before you spend anything, which is the entire point. Same example as last time, so we're talking about something concrete. You run support at a software company, 40 people, a few thousand tickets a month, a help center nobody's audited in 2 years. Someone's proposing an assistant that answers customer questions from your internal documentation. First question: how often is it wrong? Nobody will hand you this number. You have to ask for it before the pilot starts because it's the one thing that can't be reconstructed afterward. The method is unglamorous and it's about a week of work. Take 100 real questions, not questions someone wrote for the test, real ones, pulled out of your actual ticket history in roughly the proportion they arrive in. That proportion matters. If a third of your tickets are billing, a third of your test set is billing. And leave the awkward ones in. The half-formed question, the angry one, the one asking about a product you discontinued, those are the questions that break it. And they're the ones a curated test set quietly drops. Then someone who knows the answers writes the correct answer for each one. Before seeing what the system produced, not after, because after, everything looks defensible. Then you compare, and you sort the results into 3 piles rather than 2. Right, wrong, and didn't answer. That third pile is important, and most scoring throws it in with the failures, but it isn't one. A system that declines to answer costs you a support ticket. A system that answers wrongly costs you a refund, a chargeback, or a customer explaining to their lawyer what your assistant told them. Now, the part that decides whether the number means anything. Whose questions were those? Who wrote the correct answers? And who did the grading? If the answer to all 3 is the team that wants this approved, you don't have a measurement. You have a number produced by people with a stake in what it says. That's not dishonesty. It's just how anyone marks their own homework and asks to see the wrong ones, not the rate, the actual failures. 10 wrong answers will tell you more about whether this thing is ready than any percentage, because you'll see immediately whether they're near misses or whether it invented a refund policy. A pilot with no error rate hasn't produced a result. It's produced an anecdote. What to ask? What's the measured error rate on real questions from our business? And who verified it? Second question: who owns the content it answers from? The assistant answers out of your help center. So the quality ceiling of the assistant is the quality of your help center, not the model, the help center, which nobody's audited in 2 years. In the pilot, this doesn't show because the pilot used the 20 articles that happen to be current. In production, it reaches all 400, including 6 versions of the refund policy, 2 of which contradict each other, and 1 written before the product was renamed. The assistant has no way of knowing which one is right. There's no mechanism for that. It'll answer confidently from whichever it found, and it will sound exactly the same either way. This is the single most common way these projects die, and it's the least interesting thing to talk about, which is exactly why it keeps happening. Cleaning up documentation isn't an AI project. It's the prerequisite nobody budgets for, and nobody's job description covers. Try asking who owns it. You'll usually get a pause. Support assumes it's product marketing. Product marketing assumes it's support. It was genuinely somebody's job 3 reorgs ago. That's nobody's fault. Help center content decays quietly because nothing breaks when it does. The assistant changes that. You've taken a document set that was allowed to rot in private and put it in front of customers at machine speed in a confident tone of voice. So when you ask who owns it, listen for 3 things: a name, a cadence, and time in that person's week. A policy document isn't ownership. A named person with 4 hours a month and the authority to delete things is. What to ask: who owns the content this answers from, and what's their plan for keeping it current? Third question, and this is the one that ends careers rather than projects, so I'll be brief and direct about it. If you point a retrieval system at your file store, it retrieves from your file store all of it: the compensation spreadsheet, the unannounced reorg deck, the legal memo about the thing most of the company doesn't know about yet. In a 6-week pilot with 1 team and a curated folder, you'll never see this. In production, connected to the shared drive and open to everyone, you'll see it inside a week. The system has to enforce the same access controls as the underlying systems per user at the moment of the question, not a filter bolted on afterward. If someone can get an answer drawn from a document they aren't cleared to open, you haven't built a knowledge assistant, you've built a very polite data leak. Ask this before anything is connected to anything, because it's far harder to retrofit than to design in, and it's the question most likely to change which vendor you pick. And insist on a demonstration rather than a description. 2 accounts, different clearance, same question, live, in front of you. Everyone says yes to this question. Far fewer can show you. There's a whole episode on this one because it deserves it. What to ask? Does it enforce per user permissions at query time? And can you show me with 2 accounts right now? Fourth, and this is the question that's usually never been asked out loud, what error rate would make this a success? Without an answer, there's no version of this project that can finish. There's no line to cross. It just stays in pilot, getting slightly better, forever. The answer is never 0. Your human support team is wrong sometimes too, and you built an apparatus around that. Escalation, review, a way to complain. Expecting perfection from software when you never expected it from people is how a project stalls permanently. And the number depends entirely on what the answer touches. An assistant drafting internal summaries can be wrong fairly often because a person reads it before it matters. An assistant telling a customer what their contract entitles them to cannot, because there's nobody standing between the answer and the consequence. So the honest version of the question is 3-part. Wrong how often, about what, and with who checking. And there's one behavior worth making a hard requirement. The system has to be able to say it doesn't know. An assistant that admits it can't find something is worth more than one that always produces an answer. Because the one that always answers has no way of telling you when to stop trusting it. Every answer arrives with the same confidence, whether it came from your refund policy or from nowhere. Most demos won't show you this because it doesn't look impressive. Ask to see it anyway. Ask a question your documents don't cover and watch what happens. That's a 30-second test, and it's the most informative half-minute in the meeting. What to ask? What error rate are we accepting, and what does it do when it doesn't know? Fifth, and the hardest to fix because it isn't a technical decision at all. The pilot ran alongside the existing process. The team used the assistant and then did their job the way they always had. Nothing was removed, nothing was rewired. The assistant was an addition. That's the correct way to run a pilot and a fatal way to run production. If the workflow doesn't change, the only thing you've bought is a faster search box. And the return is whatever a faster search box is worth. Which is real, and it isn't the number in the business case. The practical version, if you can't name the step that goes away, you don't have a production plan. You have a subscription, and there's usually a new cost hiding in that gap. A survey of more than 300 enterprise marketing leaders found 70% had AI in production, and 88% said the output still needed moderate to substantial human editing before anyone could use it. That editing is labor, real hours, done by people you already employ, and almost no business case carries it as a line item. You didn't remove a step. You added a review step and called it automation. There's a quick tell for this one. Ask what happens to the queue. Ask what happens to average handle time. If the answer is that nothing really changes and everyone just gets a bit faster, the benefit is diffuse. And diffuse benefits don't survive a renewal review because nobody can point at the thing you stopped doing. What to ask? Which step in our current process goes away, and who's accountable for making that happen? So here they are together. 5 questions to put to your vendor or to your own team before you approve anything. 1. What's the measured error rate on real questions from our business and who verified it? 2. Who owns the content it answers from and how does it stay current? 3. Does it enforce per user permissions at query time, and can you demonstrate that, not describe it? 4. What error rate are we accepting and what does the system do when it doesn't know? 5. Which step in our current process goes away and who's accountable for that change? Look at what they have in common. Error measurement, content ownership, access control, a definition of good enough, and a process change. Not one of them is about the model. Every one is an organizational question wearing a technical costume, which is why swapping in a better model almost never rescues a stalled project, and why teams keep trying it anyway. It's the only lever that feels like it's in reach. If the answers to these 5 are confident and specific, you're talking to someone who's done this before. If they're vague, or if the response is to redirect you to a demo, you've just learned something more valuable than anything the demo would have shown you. And there's a version of this worth saying plainly, because nobody selling you anything will. If you ask these 5 questions and the honest answers are bad, the right decision might be not to start. That isn't a failure. A pilot that never runs costs you a meeting. A pilot that runs for 8 months on top of documentation nobody owns costs you a year, a budget line, and the credibility to propose it again when the conditions are actually right. The projects that make it aren't the ones that pick the best model. They're the ones where somebody in the room insisted on these answers before anyone signed anything. You don't need to understand how the model works to ask these. You need to be the person in the room who does. Next time, the third question, in full. Why pointing an AI at your file store hands everyone in the building a key to everything in it, and what enforcing permissions properly actually looks like. If this was useful, subscribe. See you then.